I enjoy having my fingers and toes stepped on unknowingly. I always liked the idea of having a female stranger stepping on me without being caught. It was exhilarating and a real turn-on for me. It adds a dimension that you just don't get with a willing partner. I remember this one incident at a football game. As with most football stadiums, there are bleachers which offer many possibilities for finger trampling. A lot of women, probably due to the fact that they are shorter, like to stand on the seats during exciting periods of the game. I happened to be sitting next to a couple of very attractive girls during this game and noticed that the one next to me, a 5'4", slight-built blonde, was constantly standing up on the seat right next to me. A couple times she accidentally kicked me with the wooden-soled high heels she was wearing. After looking down a couple times only to see that no harm was done, she paid absolutely no attention to me. I watched her sexy feet as they pranced on and trampled the seat. This was turning me on as I sat there. Then the crowd calmed down and everyone sat down again. I waited, all the time thinking of her feet and stealing the occasional glance at her legs and shoes. Then all at once the crowd started cheering and she, along with many others, stood up. I knew it was now or never. I casually slid my hand towards her feet till I felt her shoe. I looked over to see my fingers were touching the side of her shoe by her toes. She lifted up onto her toes and off her heels. I quickly slid my fingers under her heel. I waited with shaking anticipation as she stood there on her toes for what seemed like an eternity. Then I heard the cheering calm and felt an instant pain as she sank her heels into my fingers. Then, just as quick as she dug her heel into my finger, she stepped off it and sat down. Let me tell you, even though it didn't last very long, this little girl caused a lot of pain when her heel crushed my finger. About 15 minutes later, the crowd again started cheering, and she stood up on the seat. I waited and slid my fingers under her heel. I didn't have to wait too long before she leaned back on her heels. 2 of my fingers were being mercilessly crushed under the heel of her left shoe. She just stood there this time. The pain was intense and all I thought I could bear until she shifted her weight to her right foot and released most of the pressure from her left heel and my fingers. I could not get my fingers out from under her heel, since she still had just enough pressure on them to hold them fast. I was held like this for a few minutes. Then when I figured she was about to step off the seat and my fingers, the crowd roared again and she stood there. For a while she had her weight on her right foot, but all of a sudden, she shifted her weight to her left foot. The pain was unbelievable. She now had all her weight on the left foot and my fingers. She was just dangling her right shoe over the end of the seat. Although not stilettos, her heels were still less than an inch thick, just enough to hold 2 fingers. I could see my fingers flattened where her heel was on them. The ends of my fingers were white. They ached something awful. It went from excruciating pain to an ache to an almost burning sensation, then a dull, throbbing ache. I sat there thinking I was going to pass out from the pain. She stood there for what seemed like an hour, but which was in reality about 2 or 3 minutes. Finally, she stepped off my fingers and I retrieved my hand. I looked at my 2 fingers and they had a real sharp imprint of the bottom of her heel. It was hours later when I finally got feeling back in the tips of those 2 fingers, but they ached for days. The game was over and as we all filed out of the stadium, I was directly behind her. It was the usual crowded shuffle and bottleneck at the exits. This time I casually slid my foot next to her heels, hoping to get my toes stepped on as well. I tried this several times with no success. Finally, when we were near the door, someone bumped into her and she stepped back, sinking her heel right into the top of my foot. Although not as painful as what she had done to my fingers, it still hurt a lot. Well, I was finally outside and watched as this girl and her friend walked off. All in all, a very stimulating evening.